you have green microbanks and a septum ring and you're always boiling on the inside. Because you're in a basement and you don't eat enough red meat.
Scratch their heads, wondering what to make of it.
1, lazy. 2, the patriarchy.
I don't need to hear your story because I lived your story.
So now we're getting more into the science-based and nutritional knowledge. First, we're going to go over cholesterol, which will be by far the longest topic. And then we'll very quickly go over carotenoids. And then we'll spend a bit of time on iron, which is really significant as well. And then we'll go over endocrine disrupting chemicals. The focus of this section is on cholesterol, and it fits into this pattern in a few fascinating ways. Many other nutrients found only or predominantly in animal-based foods will come into the discussion in this section, including sulfur, zinc, cobalamin/B12, vitamin D, amino acids, and saturated fatty acids. But let's first talk a little bit about cholesterol, then discuss a few of its roles in the body and conditions associated with low cholesterol. Okay, so approximately 73% of our body's total cholesterol pool is made endogenously, which means inside the body, with the other 27%, if you're eating 300 milligrams, coming from diet. Both endogenous and exogenous levels can vary. Plant matter contains no cholesterol. Cholesterol can only be consumed by eating animal-based foods such as meat, animal fats, eggs, and dairy. And not all cholesterol that is eaten is absorbed into the body. This suggests that if a person is consuming little to no animal-based foods, they may see a large reduction in their pool of available cholesterol while also getting insufficient amounts of the following nutrients: heme iron, B12, sulfur, zinc, and amino acids. There are many more, but these are the nutrients that are most pertinent to this discussion. Since cholesterol plays a vital role in cell structure and biology, serotonin neurotransmission, myelination, cholesterol sulfate, sex steroid hormones, and bile production, it's quite likely that for some people, a significant reduction in animal-based food intake could cause health concerns through insufficient cholesterol. Low cholesterol, or hypocholesterolemia, which is total cholesterol below 160 milligrams per deciliter, can also occur because you aren't making enough of it endogenously inside your body. People vary in their ability to make cholesterol for a variety of reasons. Besides genetics, low-calorie diets or problems with low energy and excess stress can lead to low cholesterol because the main substrate for cholesterol is acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA is broken down from fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, and is also a substrate for energy production in the citric acid cycle. If you are lacking energy, your body will preference acetyl-CoA towards energy production, which is more critical. This may leave you lacking in acetyl-CoA to make cholesterol for all the various important functions cholesterol has, which again include cell structure and biology, serotonin neurotransmission, myelination of neurons, making cholesterol sulfate, creating sex steroid hormones, and bile production. Due to perceptions surrounding cholesterol, it's important to quickly make note on the concerns surrounding high cholesterol. There are indeed concerns with very specific cholesterol molecule levels and measurements. Dr. Peter Attia is a great resource for this. He's very concerned about the problems of certain specific cholesterol molecules and explains those very well. However, the general public's concerns around high total serum cholesterol are completely inflated and without nuance. The dietary advice that has resulted from a widespread acceptance of the lipid hypothesis is to limit cholesterol and saturated fat intake. Getting into the nuances of this argument would be an entire discussion on its own. Up-to-date research makes it clear that low total serum cholesterol puts you at much greater risk for all-cause mortality compared to high total cholesterol. For example, a very large South Korean study titled Total Cholesterol and All-Cause Mortality by Sex and Age, a prospective cohort study among 12.8 million adults, found that the total cholesterol range associated with the lowest mortality was 210 to 249 milligrams per deciliter. And people with the lowest total cholesterol were more than twice as likely to die from all causes compared to this group. This is very strong evidence against the common recommendation of keeping total cholesterol below 200 milligrams per deciliter and saying that the lower the better, which people commonly say. Although stated as good news by the authors at the time, the perhaps not so good news is that the trend in the US has been a substantial and consistent decline in total cholesterol from the years 1960 to 1991, and a moderate decrease from 1988 to 2008. Nonetheless, the meaning of high cholesterol can effectively be ignored for this discussion. This discussion is about people with low cholesterol levels, people whom, by the fact that they have low cholesterol levels, do not need to be concerned about any issues that may or may not come with high total serum cholesterol. On this matter, Supras and co-authors write, given the fact that cholesterol plays a crucial role in several of our cellular and tissue mechanisms, it is not surprising that there are several consequences due to the aggressive reduction of cholesterol levels in the body, which has been common practice over the last few decades. In addition, targeting cholesterol and fat intake by introducing diets with low-fat products and by reducing the intake of high-fat foods can lead to less absorption and lower bioavailability of other lipids containing high-value nutrients such as several lipid-soluble vitamins, especially vitamin D, and other lipid molecules. Such lipids have exhibited a plethora of beneficial bioactivities, not only related to reducing the risk of chronic diseases, but also through a wide range of important biofunctionalities and anti-inflammatory properties. Therefore, lower cholesterol levels do not equate to better health or to lower risk of chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease. Homeostasis must be maintained even with regard to cholesterol, both HDL and LDL. As will be discussed, there are a great many dangers associated with low cholesterol. These dangers are unfortunately rarely discussed or understood. Whether dangers of high cholesterol are warranted or not, it is unwise to think in such extremes that encourage a narrow-minded view of high cholesterol is bad, so low cholesterol must be good. Like with most issues, there is nuance. It is possible that both too much and too little can lead to problems. This balanced viewpoint, although still rather simple, is important to keep in mind when thinking about cholesterol, because I am about to outline the many important functions of cholesterol as well as the very serious dangers of low cholesterol. Cholesterol acts as a temperature buffer for cell membranes, adjusting its fluidity based on environmental conditions. It ensures that the membrane remains flexible enough to allow for necessary cellular processes while maintaining its stability and protecting against excessive fluidity in hot conditions or rigidity in cold conditions. Cholesterol allows the cell membrane to maintain the appropriate balance of fluidity and rigidity across a range of temperatures. I call this dynamic stability, and I believe there's a fractal pattern where cholesterol provides dynamic stability not just at the cellular level, but also at the level of the individual and their emotional stability as well. Here's something most people don't know. Low serum cholesterol is associated with lower cognitive abilities, autism spectrum disorder, schizophrenia, depression and mood disorders, suicide, self-harm, and violence. It's theorized that one connecting reason low serum cholesterol can lead to this broad range of effects is because cholesterol is needed for proper serotonin and oxytocin signaling. To put it simply, serotonin and oxytocin are understood to inhibit violence and promote relaxation. In other words, serotonin helps to make an individual feel calm inside, confident, sure of themselves, at peace, and satisfied. It's quite clear that a pattern is emerging, as we should notice how ASD, schizophrenia, depression, mood disorders, suicide, self-harm, and violence are all afflictions where the general outcomes of serotonin, inhibiting violence and promoting relaxation, are lacking. Let's delve into a specific example that connects these afflictions with low serum cholesterol levels. Smith-Lemli-Opitz syndrome is a genetic disorder of cholesterol metabolism, and it provides us with a pretty fascinating perspective. People with SLOS have very low serum cholesterol levels, and as mentioned earlier, low serum cholesterol levels are strongly associated with ASD. Approximately 50 to 75% of children with SLOS are on the autism spectrum. Researchers Lee and Tierney found in 9 of the 17 patients with SLOS who started cholesterol supplementation prior to the age of 5 years, only 22% met the diagnostic criteria for ASD, compared to 88% of those 8 who did not start cholesterol supplementation prior to 5 years of age. Within days of taking cholesterol supplementation, which is before there is a measurable change in the plasma cholesterol or 7-DHC level, a number of parents of children with SLOS observed changes in their child's behavior, in particular, a decrease in the number of autistic behaviors. All these findings support the hypothesis that the change in behavior occurs following changes in the levels of cholesterol-derived steroid products, as opposed to the notion that it is the level of cholesterol, which is unable to cross the blood-brain barrier, that is important. They continue to say, a clinical diagnosis of SLOS can be confirmed by laboratory testing with an elevated plasma 7-DHC level relative to the cholesterol level and is treatable by dietary cholesterol supplementation. Individuals with SLOS who have such cholesterol treatment display fewer autistic behaviors, infections, and symptoms of irritability and hyperactivity, with improvements in physical growth, sleep, and social interactions. Other behaviors shown to improve with cholesterol supplementation include aggressive behaviors, self-injury, temper outbursts, and trichotillomania, which is pulling out one's own hair. Cholesterol ought to be considered as a helpful treatment approach while awaiting an improved understanding of cholesterol metabolism and autism spectrum disorder. Those two passages alone speak volumes to the pattern surrounding low cholesterol. A simple way to look at it is that it seems people with low cholesterol may lack some inner peace and stability that makes them prone to tantrums, violence, and self-harm. In the same way a cell loses dynamic stability without enough cholesterol, it seems a person also loses dynamic stability without enough cholesterol as well. Extending the fractal pattern one level further, perhaps a society's peace and stability is also associated with the degree to which they demonize cholesterol. Cholesterol is also the precursor molecule for all steroid hormones made in the body, such as progesterone, testosterone, estrogen, cortisol, aldosterone, androstenedione, dihydroepiandrosterone, or DHEA. The precursor to cholesterol, 7-dehydrocholesterol, is also the precursor to the steroid hormone vitamin D. These hormones are all crucial for healthy development and function. Testosterone is a major sex hormone in both men and women. In both sexes, low testosterone can lead to reduced sex drive and libido, depressed mood and decreased sense of well-being, reduced muscle mass, and reduced bone density. It's evident that testosterone levels, at least in Western men, have been decreasing over the years, and even for young American men. Perhaps relatedly, total cholesterol has been decreasing for American adults over much of the same time period. Given the fact that cholesterol is a precursor to all sex steroid hormones, it's not surprising that testosterone status seems to be positively influenced by increasing serum cholesterol levels and vice versa. There's a pattern in that multiple methods of influencing testosterone status by means of dietary or nutritional changes seem to be through influencing serum cholesterol levels. High-fat diets raise cholesterol and improve testosterone status, while low-fat diets decrease cholesterol levels and worsen testosterone status in men. Increasing saturated fats and increasing the ratio of saturated fats to polyunsaturated fats is effective at increasing cholesterol and improving testosterone status in men, and vice versa. Increases in dietary fiber, on the other hand, decrease cholesterol and worsen testosterone status in men, and vice versa. Though not through cholesterol, zinc improves testosterone status in men as well. Plant-based diets tend to be lower in fat, specifically saturated fats, and the ratio of saturated fat to polyunsaturated fat is much lower. Plant-based diets tend to be also higher in fiber and lower in zinc, as well as many other important nutrients. And given the evidence on how these nutrients affect testosterone status in men, avoiding animal-based foods in the diet may lead to lower testosterone status for both men and women. Since influencing serum cholesterol is the likely pathway through which most of these nutrients affect testosterone status, it's reasonable to predict that the status of other steroid hormones in both men and women may be negatively affected by avoiding animal-based foods or by having low cholesterol for any other reasons. This is supported by finding that a low-fat and high-fiber diet lead to significant decreases in serum concentrations of multiple sex steroid hormones in premenopausal women. It's also important to keep in mind that testosterone tends to be lower when cortisol, another steroid hormone made from cholesterol, is elevated, and vice versa. So given how important testosterone is for both men and women, close attention should be paid to testosterone status and how it can be affected by diet, cholesterol, and stress. Connecting to the question of why some people are paler than others, we need to realize that there are actually multiple ways in which someone might be pale. As we'll see later, carotenoids are a dietary molecule that gives our skin yellow to red pigmentation, and a lack of carotenoids can result in a pale appearance. Iron oxygenates the blood, giving the skin a rosy glow, which is why people who are sick and anemic develop a pale look. But perhaps where our minds first naturally go is to the sun and how much sun exposure someone gets. There are some nutrients such as copper and zinc that can actually improve the skin's resilience to sun exposure and improve its ability to tan. Vegetable oils, on the other hand, being made up of weak, oxidized, and inflammatory polyunsaturated fatty acids, can cause one to burn more easily in the sun. In a very real way, we are what we eat. The lipids we eat end up as part of our skin. Cholesterol, being the strong, versatile lipid it is, seems to make skin less susceptible to sunburn. And we see that a common symptom amongst SLOS patients is actually photosensitivity. Many of these patients must take extreme precaution avoiding sun exposure. Cholesterol supplementation, however, reduces photosensitivity in SLOS patients. Cholesterol sulfate may be another important piece to this puzzle, but I'm not going to focus on that today. If you want to learn more about cholesterol sulfate, you can dive into the work of Dr. Stephanie Seneff, who has a lot of work published on cholesterol sulfate. Another thing people probably don't know about cholesterol is that it has anti-inflammatory properties and is important for immune function. Low serum cholesterol is associated with higher infection rates and poor immune responses to pathogens such as COVID-19, hepatitis C, and AIDS. Possibly the most important connection in this whole pattern is the connection between cholesterol and bile production. So bile is made from cholesterol and it's critical for digesting dietary fats. It's produced in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and pumped into the small intestine following fat consumption. In order to make bile, the liver needs phospholipids, cholesterol, and amino acids, specifically taurine and glycine, both of which are found mostly in animal-based proteins, but especially taurine. Taurine is pretty much only in animal-based products. Without adequate bile production, digestive discomfort and acid reflux can occur after eating foods that are high in fat. Without adequate bile production, stool after eating fat-heavy foods will be lighter in color due to a lack of bile, and it will be greasy and float due to the undigested fats that are in the stool. Bile is needed for absorption of fat-soluble nutrients like vitamins A, D, E, and K, as well as carotenoids, which we'll get to later. Bile is also used for the removal of toxins from drugs, xenobiotics, bacteria, waste products, and bilirubin. Bile is eliminated in the feces following its use in the digestion of fats. However, due to the expense of making bile, it's tightly conserved and largely recycled. Bile production is signaled by dietary fat intake. So consuming fats stimulates the gallbladder to release bile into the intestine, and this means that if fats are not consumed or consumed much less, there will be a reduction in bile production and a reduction in bile excretion into the feces. If bile is not flowing, which means it's not being produced, it's not being pumped out of the gallbladder into the gut following fat consumption, and it's not being excreted out in feces, then toxins and waste products that are typically bound to bile will remain in the liver and the gallbladder for an extended period. If bile is not being circulated and eliminated, cholesterol concentrations can also build up in the bile, causing it to crystallize or become less fluid, which can lead to gallstones. Unfortunately, what this all means is that people can enter a positive feedback loop from a reduction in cholesterol production and or a reduction in fat or cholesterol intake. So let's say someone has trouble with cholesterol metabolism in the first place, so they don't produce adequate amounts of bile. This leads to poor digestion and absorption of high-fat foods and fat-soluble nutrients. Someone in this situation may find that they don't feel good after eating many different animal-based foods because of the fat content. But then if they opt to reduce or eliminate animal-based foods and the high-fat foods, because of discomfort, if they do that, they might not get enough of the nutrients needed to form the bile and stomach acid in the first place. To form the bile, they need the taurine, the glycine, and the cholesterol. And to form the stomach acid, they need zinc, B12, histidine, and some other nutrients. So this would lead to further increases in digestive discomfort when eating animal-based foods, further reduction in eating animal-based foods, further deficiency in important nutrients needed for digestion, and so on. Someone in this situation might be incentivized to base their diet more around plant-based foods and carbohydrates to avoid digestive discomfort. While this may be an effective short-term strategy, it can cause long-term nutrient deficiencies, digestive problems, and then prolong this vicious cycle of poor bile production and flow. Alternatively, one could enter this cycle from also adopting a poor diet, low in the mentioned important nutrients and fats, or from having poor liver function, or from having poor gallbladder function. A Finnish study compared omnivorous and vegetarian children to vegan children aged 3 to 4. So they were looking at both the omnivorous and vegetarian children, comparing those groups to the vegan children. The main findings in vegan children included very low cholesterol concentrations and modified bile acid metabolism, as well as their markedly low fat-soluble vitamin status, despite their nutrient intakes matching current national recommendations fairly well. So the vegans were significantly lower in their taurine to glycine bile salt conjugation ratio, and this shouldn't be surprising because of the low amount of taurine in a vegan diet. The researchers explained that vegan diets contain only little taurine, and that this finding was in accordance with previous studies on vegan adults. The mean total serum cholesterol in the vegan group was also strikingly low, despite endogenous hepatic cholesterol biosynthesis markers being similar between the vegan and omnivore groups. The authors concluded that these data suggest that endogenous cholesterol biosynthesis does not show a compensatory response to lack of dietary cholesterol. So basically what they're saying there is that you cannot make up for all the cholesterol that you're not eating by making it endogenously. You need to be eating some of that cholesterol, it looks like. The authors further discussed how the markedly low cholesterol in vegan infants and children in our study raises the question of whether such levels are healthy, as cholesterol is essential for cellular growth, division, and development of physiological systems due to its major role in the synthesis of cell membranes, steroid hormones, bile acids, and brain myelin. Longitudinal studies on the health effects of consuming a strict vegan diet since birth have not been conducted. Unsurprisingly, given the importance of bile for the digestion and absorption of fat-soluble nutrients, the vegan group also had significantly lower levels of the two fat-soluble vitamins that were measured in the study. Vitamin A was low despite the vegan diets containing adequate vitamin A. Vitamin D was low despite the samples being taken during and after summer times of year with expectedly peak vitamin D storage. So what this means is that the problem doesn't pertain to access to getting enough of the vitamins and nutrients. It seems that even if you're getting enough, the problem is more specifically due to whether or not you can absorb enough. This is how I see the pattern of problems associated with low cholesterol in relation to the patterns of the anxious social justice warrior type of person, and in particular with gender dysphoria. People with gender dysphoria tend to be more likely to have ASD type behaviors and be on the spectrum. People with gender dysphoria are more likely to struggle with anxiety and depression or mood disorders. People with gender dysphoria have very high suicide rates. People with gender dysphoria show typical self-harm type behaviors and desires. And I also believe a desire to bind and or remove one's own healthy reproductive organs may be related to self-harm type behaviors. I would also throw in that if someone is getting many tattoos, suddenly cutting their hair very short, and or dyeing their hair loud colors, these actions may just be related to self-harm type behaviors, as well as feelings of discomfort and self-dissatisfaction. Furthermore, I argue progressivism and authoritarianism are actually related to this overall pattern of violence, self-harm, suicide, and feelings of discomfort, feelings that we aren't enough, and feelings that we need drastic change. It should be kept in mind that as unproductive as they may often be, these tendencies and behaviors towards drastic change and destruction may in a way be adaptive, kind of a desperate effort to try something that will likely fail but might just work. Generally speaking, if you're in a good spot, you will be hesitant to make changes and will value conserving what you have. You will simultaneously desire your individual freedom to maintain the situation through your own sovereignty. If, however, you're in a terrible spot, you're more willing to seek change and destroy everything in hopes of progressing towards something better than the current mess. You'll also be more willing to let powerful parties and external actors take greater control of the chaotic situation you're in hopes that they will manage things better. It's the eternal balance and struggle between being conservative or progressive. Too conservative and the situation stagnates, you fail to adapt and try necessary changes. Too progressive and you'll have unintended consequences, ruin what good things you did have, and experience hyper novelty. When you're in a terrible situation, is it better to reflect on how you may have strayed from tradition and attempt to reconcile tried and true patterns of behavior that worked well in the past? Or do you try something completely new? Of course, a balance must be struck between the two in order to move forward optimally. and this goes for people who are experiencing poor health as well. It's important to remember that any threatening feedback will lower your serotonin and make you more anxious. So whether you lose repeated physical fights or lose repeated verbal arguments, your serotonin will be downregulated and you'll become more anxious. This is adaptive because you have learned in some way that you are weak and vulnerable to potential or ongoing threat. Your body, through means such as your serotonin system, takes note on how physically strong and well-nourished you are. If you're well-nourished with ample strength and energy, you'll be confident and comfortable. However, if you're poorly nourished without much strength and energy, and you're vulnerable to infection, you're going to be more anxious and uncomfortable, states that are more suitable when you're vulnerable and under threat. Unfortunately, though, the angst we feel when we are under threat and have low serotonin is non-specific. If you lose an intense verbal battle with someone and you're humiliated, you would also feel less confident going into a physical fight immediately following, and you would likely also perform worse too, even though the verbal battle wasn't an indicator of your physical prowess whatsoever, and vice versa. So the same thing is true for nourishment. If you're undernourished, you aren't given the benefit of having your angst directed towards the precise malnourishment. Instead, it manifests as a generalized angst towards the whole world, yourself included. This is at least the case until you can attach that angst to a problem that you believe is behind the cause of your suffering. Notice how I didn't say that it must be the correct problem. Whether it's climate change, immigration concerns, or your own body, when you're filled with anxiety, you are constantly looking for what could be the problem behind your suffering. And you're often quite happy to attach that anxiety to any problem you can, just simply so that you can feel that at least I'm doing something about it. People, politicians, marketers, and media can and often do take advantage of anxiety in this way. It's very important for every single person to take responsibility for their own health and their nourishment, simply so that they're not made vulnerable like this. For myself, I was quite lucky in that at some point I realized nutrition was a problem in my life, and so I directed my anxiety towards looking for nutritional solutions instead of what I typically did was directing my anxiety towards everything else. I believe that a combination of going back to tried and true traditions and experimenting with new solutions eventually worked for me. It didn't solve all the problems in my life, but I was at least able to feel more at peace with myself and in turn more at peace with the world around me.